Airlines just added 73,000 extra seats to Menorca for 2026. The tour season is starting earlier than it has ever started, and every travel blog in Europe is pointing people here as the escape from Mallorca and Ibiza. So let me ask the question nobody in the travel industry wants to answer. Is Menorca actually still quiet, or did it stop being quiet the moment everyone found out it was quiet?
Welcome to Phil and H Travel. Is it worth it? I am H, and this is the episode for everyone who has been told Menorca is the Balearic island that still has its soul intact, because in 2026, that is a claim worth interrogating properly. Is this genuinely the last unspoiled corner of the Spanish islands, or are we already too late?
The Balearic Parliament is debating tourist caps right now. 19 million people visited the Balearic Islands in 2025, and the cheapest decent hotel room in Menorca in peak season costs more per night than a 4-star in Lisbon. Let us get into it.
So to really understand how a tiny island, right, with a baseline population of just 96,000 residents is bracing for this kind of influx, you kind of have to look at the legal and geographical framework that made it so desirable in the first place.
Right.
Because Menorca was designated a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve back in 1993. And that isn't just, a shiny plaque they put up in the airport terminal. It is a rigid legal framework.
It has actual teeth.
Exactly. It dictates land use, development, environmental protection across all 702 square kilometers of the island.
Which basically means they legally cannot just pave over the island to build those massive mega complexes like they did on, say, the Costa del Sol in the 70s.
No, we can't.
But here's the tension we really need to interrogate today. You have an island that is built and legally protected to be an intimate, slow-paced sanctuary. On paper, it receives about 1.2 million tourists a year.
Which sound like a lot until you zoom out.
Exactly, because when you stack that up against Mallorca taking in 13.4 million or Ibiza absorbing 8 million, Menorca looks like a ghost town.
It looks like the ultimate escape, yeah. But the data for 2026 shows a massive structural shift in how the travel industry is actually treating that escape.
Right.
Because airlines haven't just maintained their routes, they have actively injected 73,000 extra airline seats into the Menorcan market for this specific season.
Wow.
Yeah, that is a 3.1% year-on-year increase in sheer capacity.
Yeah.
And it is overwhelmingly driven by the UK market.
And it isn't just that more people are coming, right? It's when they are coming. The entire tourist season is practically shifting on its axis.
Oh, completely.
We are seeing major coastal hotels activating their staff and opening their doors in mid-March. Historically, the island was completely dormant until May.
Yeah, and you also have to look at the search data for this, which is up 17% year-on-year. And what I find truly fascinating is the origin of that search growth.
Where is it coming from?
Portugal, Italy, and France.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Think about that for a second. These are countries with their own spectacular, world-renowned Mediterranean coastlines.
Right. They have the Amalfi Coast, they have the Algarve.
Exactly. So the fact that travelers from those specific nations are aggressively looking at Menorca, well, it tells us something critical about the psychology of modern travel. People are just fleeing the chaos of mainstream European hotspots. They are desperate for the quote-unquote quiet alternative.
I see this as the ultimate paradox of modern travel marketing. We take a place, we brand it as the perfect escape from over-tourism, and by doing so, we directly cause over-tourism in that exact spot.
Yes, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's like finding a genuinely exclusive, hidden speakeasy. The secrecy is what gives it its value. But the moment the password is printed on the front page of the local newspaper, it absolutely ceases to be a speakeasy.
Right.
Has Menorca just had its password printed?
I mean, the password isn't just printed, it's being broadcast on a megaphone right now, and the local government is acutely aware of it. Which brings us to the massive legislative threat hanging over the region right now. The Balearic Parliament has proposed a hard cap on total annual visitors to the islands. They want to limit it to 17.8 million people per year across the entire archipelago. And that's a strict ceiling based on the 2023 arrival numbers.
But the kicker here is that they are grouping Menorca right into that over-tourism legislation, along with Mallorca and Ibiza. So the island that literally markets itself as the cure for over-tourism is now being legally and administratively treated as a victim of it.
It's a really blunt instrument of a law. So the mission for this deep dive is to figure out what happens when those 73,000 extra people actually land. Are they going to ruin the islands?
Right.
And to answer that, we have to look closely at its physical geography, because the shape of Menorca dictates literally everything about how crowds move and bottleneck.
So let's map it out for you. Menorca is the most easterly and the second largest of the Balearics. It is 47 kilometers long and 16 kilometers wide.
They're pretty compact.
Very compact. You've got the city of Mahon in the east and the city of Ciutadella in the west. And connecting them is a single road, the ME1. That is the spine of the island.
Yeah. There is no coastal highway ringing the island. If you want to go anywhere, you have to get on the ME1.
And that single spine geography, that is why the timing of your trip is the single most important decision you will make.
Definitely.
Let's look at the reality of the August travel rush. If you look at the neighboring islands in August, the infrastructure is just buckling. I mean, Mallorca has 90-minute queues just to get through the airport.
Miserable.
Palma's Old Town is essentially impassable at midday. In Ibiza, you are looking at €20 entry fees just to walk through the doors of a beach club, and then €18 cocktails once you finally make it to the bar.
Which sounds completely exhausting, but I want to push back on the idea that Menorca is some perfectly serene alternative in August.
Oh, absolutely.
It is quieter, sure, relative to Ibiza,
Mm-hmm.
but if you want to visit the top, headline beaches, places like Cala Macarella, Cala Turqueta, or Playa de Menorca, you are not rolling out of bed at 10 a.m., having a leisurely breakfast and strolling onto the sand.
No, not at all. You absolutely demand pre-9 a.m. arrivals just to secure a parking spot before the local authorities literally close the access roads.
Yeah, and this is what we call the August trap. I find the psychology of it just fascinating.
Oh, how so?
Well, why do travelers consistently expect deserted, pristine beaches in the absolute peak of the European school holidays? There is this massive cognitive dissonance at play. People pay a massive premium for the marketing idea of quiet Menorca in August, completely forgetting that millions of other people across the continent are legally restricted by the school calendar to that exact same travel window.
I have to ask then, is paying peak August prices for a beach? You have to set a 6 a.m. alarm for basically the equivalent of paying premium ticket prices for a concert, only to be told you have to bring your own chair and sit in the parking lot.
It is the exact same dynamic. You are paying a premium for the privilege of working incredibly hard for your holiday.
Yeah.
Which is why we need to break down the island month by month, because the experience completely changes depending on when you land. Let's start with March and April. Temperatures are hovering between 15 and 19 degrees Celsius. The island is just waking up. Prices are at their absolute lowest. The major beach resorts are mostly still closed, but the hiking is phenomenal.
Then you hit May. Temperatures climb to a very comfortable 20 to 23 degrees Celsius. The island is at about 30% capacity. To me, this feels like the absolute sweet spot if you don't need the ocean to be bathwater.
Totally agree.
June warms up to 24 to 27 degrees. It's excellent because you get the heat, but the European preschool holidays haven't kicked in yet. You can actually drive to a place like Cala Macarella without requiring military-grade logistical planning.
Right. But then July and August hit. Temperatures soar to 28 to 32 degrees Celsius. This is peak pricing, peak stress. If you want those famous southern coves, you either need to charter a boat or accept those painfully early starts we just talked about.
Yeah, the 6 a.m. alarms.
Exactly. But if you have flexibility, let's talk about September. Because if you take one actionable piece of advice from this entire deep dive, it is this. September is the single best month to visit Menorca.
Why is September so mathematically superior?
It comes down to thermal dynamics and school calendars. In September, the daytime air temperature drops to a manageable 25 to 28 degrees. But crucially, the Mediterranean Sea has spent the entire summer absorbing heat. So the water temperature peaks at a beautiful 25 degrees.
Oh, wow. And because the kids have gone back to school, you see a massive 40% drop in crowds overnight, paired with a very welcome 10 to 20% drop in prices. It's the ultimate arbitrage.
It really is.
Moving on to October and November, this is the shoulder season. It's cooling down, the wind picks up, but it's fantastic for exploring the cultural sites. And December through February, the resorts shut down entirely. You get deeply authentic local life, but zero beach holiday infrastructure.
So regardless of which month you choose, we need to walk you through that very first moment your boots hit the ground. What does the arrival actually look like, and what is the immediate financial reality?
Let's talk about first impressions and arrival economics. You are flying into Menorca Airport, airport code MAH. It is located just 4.5 kilometers southwest of Mahon. It is very much a regional scale airport.
Very regional.
For 9 months of the year, it is breezy and manageable. But if you arrive on a peak Saturday in July or August, it is genuinely congested with back-to-back charter flights.
Oh, it's packed.
You grab a taxi from the rank to the Mahan city center, and it is going to cost you between 12 and 18 euros.
And once you are in the cities, you quickly realize Menorca is a tale of two entirely different cultural identities.
Right.
Mahon, in the east, has a distinct working-class maritime character. It sits on this massive, naturally sprawling harbor, which is actually one of the deepest natural ports in the world. Its identity is tied to the sea. It's famous for a rich, local gravy sauce, incredible fresh lobster, and something deeply tied to its geopolitical history.
Zorgan.
Wait, gin. I usually associate the Mediterranean with wine or maybe a local anise liqueur. Why gin? It goes back to the 18th century. The British occupied Menorca for nearly 100 years because that deep natural harbor was strategically vital for their navy.
Ah, of course.
Yeah, and the British sailors wanted their gin, so the locals started distilling it for them using imported juniper berries, and they just never stopped. You can sit down at a harbor bar in Mahon today, order a local Zoriger gin with bitter lemon, and it will run you about 4 to 6 euros.
That's pretty reasonable.
It's a fantastic, cheap taste of history. But then you drive to the west, to Ciutadella, and the vibe shifts completely.
Ciutadella feels like the romantic heart of the island. You have these fully pedestrianized limestone streets, an imposing Gothic cathedral, and a very different historical influence.
Yes.
If Mahon reflects working-class British naval history, Ciutadella absolutely reflects Catalan nobility. The premier free experience on the entire island is simply walking the old city walls in Ciutadella and watching the sunset.
It's stunning.
And then you experience the evening paseo, where the local families walk the port promenade at dusk. It is a living, breathing cultural rhythm.
But to get between the gin in Mahon and the sunset in Ciutadella, you have to drive that central skyline. We mentioned the ME1. And we need to heavily manage expectations here.
Oh, you really do.
Because if you are expecting the Amalfi Coast or the Pacific Coast Highway, you will be deeply disappointed. The ME1 is highly functional, agricultural, and flanked by low, dry scrubland.
It sounds like you have to drive through the world's most boring hallway just to get to the world's most beautiful rooms.
That is incredibly accurate,
Yeah.
because to access those beautiful, world-renowned coastal coves, you have to turn off that ME1 hallway onto these tiny, ancient single-track lanes.
Right.
And those lanes eventually dead-end at car parks that, as we mentioned, fill up fast. And they certainly aren't free.
Yeah.
You're paying 10 to 15 euros a day for parking in peak season.
Mm.
And they are absolutely full to capacity by 10 a.m.
Okay, so we're off the highway. We've paid the parking toll. Now, where exactly are you sleeping? Because this is where the budget really gets tested.
Yeah.
Let's run a reality check on the 4 tiers of accommodation, starting with the backpacker tier. I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off right now. Menorca is not a budget destination, period.
It is vital to stress this, especially for younger travelers looking for a cheap summer escape. There are no youth hostels on the entire island. None.
Zero.
And that isn't an accident. It is a deliberate zoning choice by the local government over decades to prevent the kind of cheap, transient party tourism that defined Ibiza in the 90s. They simply didn't build the infrastructure for it.
Right.
The absolute floor for pricing is a budget room in Mahon, which will cost between 55 and 85 euros per night. If you want a basic self-catering studio near a beach like Sunbu, you are looking at 90 to 130 euros per night during July or August.
If you arrive in Menorca expecting Greek island or Moroccan coastal prices, you are going to experience immediate financial whiplash. The 20 euro a night hostel bunk simply does not exist here.
No, it doesn't.
So let's level up to the mid-range tier. A standard 3 or 4-star city hotel in Mahon or Ciutadella will run you 130 to 200 euros a night. A standard resort hotel on the coast is 160 to 240 euros a night. But here is the secret weapon of Menorca, the agriturismo.
Yes, the agriturismos are the single best value proposition on the island. These are essentially converted historical farmhouses located in the island's interior. You're paying 140 to 220 euros a night for places like Alcafarvel or Menorca.
But wait, if they are in the interior, away from the beach, why are they the best value?
This is what we call the agriturismo advantage. Think about the economics in the cultural capital. Why would you pay 160 euros a night for a sterile standard resort block on a crowded beach when for 140 euros a night you can stay in a converted 18th century olive farmhouse?
That's a huge upgrade in vibe.
Huge. And these properties are often subsidized by agricultural heritage funds, meaning their operating costs are slightly insulated, allowing them to offer incredible quality for the price. You get genuine character, incredible local hosts who actually cook the food they grow, and profound peace and quiet. It offers exponentially more cultural value.
That makes total sense. It's a no-brainer. Now, what about the family tier? We interrogated the data and found that Menorca is arguably the best Balearic island for families with young children.
Oh, without a doubt.
The water in the southern coves is incredibly calm and shallow. If you look at an all-inclusive package at a place like Sunbu or Arnaldo and Castel, you are paying between 696 and 1,720 pounds per person per week. And that generally includes flights from the UK. It's highly structured, very safe, and it removes a massive amount of stress for parents.
And finally, we have to look at the luxury tier. Menorcan luxury is deeply understated. You are not going to see super yachts flashing neon lights and spraying champagne here.
No bottle service on the beach?
Exactly. The luxury here is about space, silence, and architecture. You have properties like Torel Bank, which ranges from 320 to 550 euros a night, or the Menorca Experimental, which is 280 to 480 euros a night. These places are architectural marvels that are seamlessly integrated into the natural landscape.
Right. So you figured out where to sleep, but eating on an island with limited supply chains is another beast entirely. Let's talk about the Menorcan palate and the brutal realities of the supermarket.
Right, because to understand the food prices, you first have to understand the food identity. It is fiercely protected and entirely distinct from mainland Spain. Because it's an island, historically they had to rely entirely on what they could pull from the sea or grow in relatively harsh, windy conditions.
Makes sense.
You have the ceremonial dish of the island, caldereta de agosto, which is a rich, complex, local lobster stew. You have oliagua am figis, which is an ancient peasant dish of cold tomato and fig soup born out of absolute necessity. They make formaggiata, a beautiful meat or cheese pastry, and sopressata, a cured pork sausage. And of course the famous Dio-protected Mahon cheese.
I've seen that term DO protected on a lot of European foods. What does that actually mean for the consumer?
DO stands for Denominación de Origen. It's a strict regulatory classification system used in Spain. If a cheese is DO-protected Mahon cheese, it means, by law, it can only be produced in Menorca using specific breeds of cows aged in a specific way.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, it protects the local dairy farmers from being undercut by massive mainland factories pumping out fake Mahon-style cheese. It guarantees authenticity, but it also means the supply is inherently limited by the size of the island, which drives the price.
Let's attach some numbers to that appetite. Let's look at dining out. If you go to the northern village of Fornells for that famous lobster stew for two, prepare your wallet. It is going to cost you between 80 and 140 euros.
It is a luxury experience.
It is. But you can balance that. A menu del dia, the daily set menu offered in town restaurants at lunch, is a fantastic deal at 14 to 18 euros. A plate of fresh fish at a local spot is 18 to 28 euros. A coffee is going to be 1.80 to 2.4 euro. A glass of local wine is 3 to 5 euros.
Not bad at all.
But watch out for the tourist beaches. A standard, often thoroughly mediocre main course at a beachside restaurant will hit you for 25 to 45 euros.
Which is precisely why so many people bypass the restaurants and hit the supermarkets.
Yeah.
But remember, this is an island. Almost everything has to be shipped in via ferry, which adds a logistics premium to every single item.
Yep.
If you go to the local Iraski or Lidl supermarkets, here's your baseline. 250 grams of that Dio-protected Mahon cheese is 4.50 or to 6.50. A liter of local olive oil is 6 to 9 euros.
Okay.
250 grams of local sopressata is 5 to 7 euros. A six-pack of Estrella Damm beer is 5.50 to 7.0. A kilo of local tomatoes is 2 to 3 euros, and a 1.5-liter bottle of water is just 90 cents to 1.3.
I have to point out the tourist tax on food here. You've got that 45 euro mediocre beach burger competing against the 14 euro authentic menu del dia right in town. The math aggressively punishes you for eating near the sand.
It does. And beyond the math, there is the etiquette. Menorca operates on a different cultural timeline. Lunch is strictly between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. Dinner does not start until 9 p.m. onward.
Wow, 9 p.m.?
Yeah, if you are used to a 6 p.m. dinner and you attempt to eat at 7 p.m. here, you are either going to find the kitchens closed or you are going to be eating alone in an empty room built for tourists.
That sounds depressing.
It is. And the language is a massive cultural key. They speak Menorquí, which is a dialect of Catalan. Saying a simple bon dia instead of the standard Spanish buenos dias genuinely opens doors. It shows the locals you recognize and respect their specific, hard-fought identity.
So I've thrown a lot of numbers at you. Let's bring it all together and tally the exact daily burn rate. Let's define the daily budgets. I like to think of your daily budget in 3 distinct buckets: the roof over your head, the car to get you around, and the food to keep you going.
Okay.
If you are doing this on the low end, which we've established isn't actually low, you are spending 118 to 173 euros per day.
Let's break those buckets down for the low tier. You are looking at 45 to 65 euros for a basic bed, 3 to 5 euros for a breakfast, pastry, and coffee, 14 to 18 euros for a menu del dia lunch, 18 to 28 euros for a local dinner. Then you have 20 to 35 euros for your share of a rental car, 8 to 12 euros for beach parking, and maybe 10 euros for incidentals.
Which is mathematically higher than an equivalent budget trip to mainland Greece.
Definitely.
Now look at the mid-range budget. It is 115 to 175 euros per person per day. That breaks down to 70 to 110 euros for a bed and an agriturismo, 60 to 90 euros for shared meals, 40 to 60 euros for a car, and 30 to 50 euros for an activity like kayak hire. Wait, let me look at these numbers again.
Yeah.
The low budget is 118 to 173 euros. The mid budget is 115 to 175 euros. They're almost identical per person. How is that mathematically possible?
It is a fascinating quirk in the island's economic ecosystem. It comes down to shared costs. The low budget assumes you're traveling solo or trying to pay for a cheap room and transport by yourself. But the moment you upgrade to an agriturismo as a couple, you are splitting the room costs, you are splitting the car hire, and you are eating better quality food that is locally sourced rather than imported. Upgrading and splitting costs is mathematically smarter than trying to rough it alone in a budget room in Mahon.
That is wild. And then you have the high budget. This is 300 to 500 plus euros per person per day. You're looking at 150 to 250 euros for a bed, 60 to 80 euros per person for fine dining, 200 to 400 euros to charter a boat, and 50 to 100 euros for premium activities.
So it scales up quickly.
It does. So to summarize all this financial data, Menorca is not a budget alternative. It is a premium product that just happens to be quieter. It's like buying a Stealth Wealth designer t-shirt. There are no flashy logos on it, but you are still paying the absolute premium for the fabric.
That is the perfect way to frame it. And now that you have your budget set in your mind, we need to talk about the 3 massive logistical traps that will blow that budget to pieces if you aren't prepared.
Trap number 1, the car hire trap. As we mentioned, there is zero public transport to the coastal beaches. None. There is just the main Mahon to Ciutadella bus that runs down the highway.
Right.
If you show up in peak season, walk up to a rental desk and try to book a car last minute, you will be paying 120 to 180 euros a day. Why? Because the fleet sizes on the island are strictly limited and the only things left are premium SUVs.
The fix for that: you must book 3 months out. If you use Hertz, Avis, Hyper, or MallorcaRentacar.com 3 months in advance, you can secure a standard car for 35 to 55 euros a day.
Huge difference.
Massive. Trap number 2 is what I call the Cala Macarella queue. Cala Macarella is the most photographed beach on the island. It has turquoise water, sheer limestone cliffs, and pine trees growing right to the water's edge.
Beautiful.
Because of that, the car park fills by 9 a.m. If you are late, you are parking on a grassy verge miles away and walking 2 kilometers, which takes about 30 minutes and 30 degrees Celsius heat just to get to the sand.
I'm sweating just thinking about that. Hiking 30 minutes on a dusty road carrying beach umbrellas and coolers because you slept in until 9:15 a.m. sounds like a miserable way to spend a vacation.
It is miserable. The solution is either taking the 12 euro return water taxi from Cala Galdana, which runs from June to September, or taking a dedicated 40-minute hike on the Camí de Cavalls coastal path.
Take the boat.
Exactly. And choosing the water taxi isn't just a clever travel hack. It is a vital, sustainable choice. The sheer volume of rental car traffic creates immense environmental degradation and genuine local tension on those narrow lanes. The locals hate the traffic jams. Take the boat.
Good advice. And trap number 3 is the villa price illusion. You go online, you see a stunning villa listed for 3,500 to 6,000 euros a week. You do the quick math in your head, you split that 8 ways with your friends, and you think, amazing, that's only 62 to 107 euros per night. We beat the system. But then the hidden fees strike at checkout. A 200 to 400 euro cleaning fee, a 1,000 plus euro damage deposit, the 2.20 euro per person per night Balearic tourist tax. Plus, you realize you have to hire linens and rent multiple cars for the group just to leave the villa.
It adds up so fast.
Suddenly, your actual costs have jumped by 20 to 30% above the sticker price. This is the Airbnb symptom on steroids, where the sticker price is just the entry fee to a maze of aggressive surcharges.
It is an absolute maze. And speaking of navigating mazes, let's talk about getting around those narrow cove roads and touch on safety, health, and doing this island solo.
From a crime perspective, Menorca is phenomenal. It has incredibly low rates of violent crime and almost zero petty crime.
Wait, really? New pickpockets?
Yeah.
Because if you go to Palma in Mallorca or Ibiza town, pickpocketing is a massive organized industry. Why is Menorca immune?
It comes down to a sociological concept known as community surveillance. Organized petty crime requires sheer volume and anonymity to function. You need massive crowds to hide in, and you need a transient population. Menorca lacks both.
Ah, I see. The population is so small, and the winter community is so tight-knit that crime simply doesn't happen because everyone knows everyone, or at least knows of everyone. If a stranger is lingering around a car park, the locals notice immediately. It creates an organic, invisible safety net for tourists.
That is incredibly reassuring. But the driving, that seems like a different story entirely. The interior roads, the ME1, that's totally fine. But those southern cove access roads we talked about, they are unsealed, flanked by dry stone walls, and terrifyingly narrow. Is this basically a high-stakes game of chicken between tourists who don't know the width of their own rental cars?
It is exactly a game of chicken.
Yeah.
And you will see minor scrapes and broken side mirrors daily in peak season. And we need to issue a crucial warning here. Do not attempt to drive to Cala Macarella or Cala Fista. These are pristine, protected coves, accessible only by boat or on foot. Every year, tourists ignore the signs, trust their GPS, and drive their rental vehicles down these delicate tracks, causing severe track damage and provoking genuine heated conflict with the locals who are trying to protect the landscape. Just walk.
Let's pivot to solo travelers. Is this a good destination if you are flying completely solo?
It's fantastic for hiking and food, but you need to know what you were signing up for. There is no party scene for mingling. There are no massive beach clubs where you can easily meet groups.
Right.
The best strategy for a solo traveler is to go in the shoulder season and book into one of the agriturismos we discussed. Because they often feature communal dining and shared outdoor spaces, they naturally facilitate meeting other travelers in a low-pressure environment. As for health and safety, you are in good hands. The Hospital Mateo or Fila in Mahon is modern, fully equipped, English-speaking, and accepts the EIC.
Just to clarify for our listeners outside the EU or the UK, what is the EIC?
The European Health Insurance Card. It allows anyone insured by a statutory social security scheme of the EEA countries and the UK to receive medical treatment in another member state for free or at a reduced cost. It is a lifesaver.
That's great to know.
And if there is an extreme medical emergency that the local hospital cannot handle, they perform rapid helicopter transfers directly to the major hospitals in Mallorca. And because of the island's small footprint, no spot on Menorca is more than 40 minutes away from the hospital.
All right, we've covered the logistics, the traps, and the hospitals. Let's get to the fun part. Let's look at what actually delivers on the marketing hype and what profoundly fails. We call this the peaks and the pits.
Let's do it.
Peak number 1, the Camí de Cavalls at dawn. What is this?
The Camí de Cavalls is an ancient 185-kilometer trail that completely rings the island. It was originally created centuries ago for soldiers on horseback to patrol the coast for pirates. It fell into private hands for a long time, but after a massive local campaign, it was made fully public in 2010. If you walk this specific section from Cala Galdana to Cala Macarella at 7 a.m. in September, it is a religious experience. You're walking through pine forests, looking down at the Mediterranean, and you get the beaches entirely to yourself before the 11 a.m. boat crowds arrive.
I love that. Peak number 2 is the Caldereta in Fornells. Fornells is a tiny, pristine fishing village of just 900 people on the north coast. It has completely resisted the ugly resort development you see elsewhere.
It's gorgeous.
You sit down at a legendary multi-generational restaurant like Contani or Eskrank. You pay 100 to 150 euros for 2 people, and you eat a lobster stew that is so historically perfect. It was famously endorsed by King Juan Carlos I of Spain. It is the culinary peak of the island.
But it's not all perfect. Let's talk about the pits. Disappointment number 1. The South Coast Resort Strip, specifically the area stretching from Sunbu to Punta Prima.
This one hurts. You have 4 kilometers of arguably the greatest sand on the island, absolutely ruined by Costa del Sol style, ugly resort architecture built in the 70s and 80s before the UNESCO protections kicked in.
Yeah, it's a shame.
You fly all this way for untouched nature, and you find yourself staring at a concrete tower block. It is like putting a priceless, beautiful painting in a cheap, ugly plastic frame. It just ruins the composition.
It is incredibly jarring. And disappointment number 2 is one that often catches culturally curious people off guard. The prehistoric sites. Menorca actually has an incredibly high density of Bronze Age monuments. These are known as talauts, tulls, and naves.
Right.
For example, the Naveta de Tudon is an ancient burial chamber. It is 3,500 years old, it sits right off the ME1 road, and entry is completely free. But our research shows that 30% of visitors walk up to it, look at it, and leave after just 5 minutes.
Let me guess. Because to the untrained eye, they just look like piles of rocks in a field.
Exactly. And this is a massive failure of tourist infrastructure. Without a guide, or at least a highly detailed audio tour, that is all they appear to be. The disappointment here stems entirely from poorly managed tourist expectations and a lack of on-site context, not the archaeology itself.
It's a branding problem.
Completely. If you understand that you are looking at monolithic structures built by a mysterious civilization centuries before the Romans even arrived, they are magnificent. Yeah. But if you just pull over expecting a museum experience, you will be deeply underwhelmed.
So let's play devil's advocate. If the ugly resorts on the South Coast, the high prices of the food, or the required early wake-up calls to get a parking spot are making you second-guess Menorca for 2026, where should you go instead? Let's talk about the pivot, the alternatives. Alternative 1, Gozo, Malta.
Gozo is Malta's smaller sister island, and it is a brilliant pivot. If you are interested in ancient history, Gozo is much better for prehistoric culture. The Gantija temples there are actually older than the pyramids.
Wait, really?
Yeah, older than the pyramids. It offers world-class limestone cave diving, and critically, it is vastly better for your budget. You can easily secure a beautiful room for 70 to 100 euros a night and a fantastic 3-course local dinner for 25 to 35 euros.
That is a massive financial relief compared to Menorca. And alternative 2, Sardinia, Italy, specifically the north coast and the interior of the island.
Sardinia is fascinating as an alternative. In the absolute peak season of July and August, it is generally 15 to 20% cheaper than Menorca. The famous Costa Smeralda gives you that exact same vibrant turquoise watercolor. And the town of Alghero perfectly matches the Catalan history and vibe of Ciutadella.
Why does an Italian town have a Catalan vibe?
Because of the Kingdom of Aragon. They conquered Alghero in the 14th century and populated it with people from Catalonia, the exact same cultural group that heavily influenced Menorca. They even speak a variant of Catalan in Alghero today. It perfectly shows how Mediterranean history completely ignores modern political borders. You get the exact same cultural experience in a different country.
So I have to ask the brutal question. If Sardinia gives you the exact same water clarity and the exact same Catalan historical vibe for 20% less money, is booking Menorca in 2026 just a failure of imagination?
For some travelers who are purely chasing aesthetics on a budget, yes, it is. But for others, the specific intimacy of Menorca is irreplicable. Which brings us perfectly to the ultimate Matrix verdict. Who should actually click book on Menorca in 2026?
Let's run the scorecard to close this out. Backpacker.
No, absolutely not. Go to Gozo or Sardinia. Menorca is financially punishing for the backpacker. When you factor in the reality of 120 to 170 euros a day for car hire in peak season, plus the lack of hostels, the numbers simply do not work. It will ruin your trip.
Mid-range couple.
Yes, but with a massive asterisk. Only if you use the agriturismo strategy, commit to walking the Camí de Cavalls instead of fighting for parking, and eat the menu del dia for lunch. If you do that, you're spending 140 to 200 euros a day total for 2 people, and you're getting an experience vastly superior and far more romantic than fighting the crowds in Mallorca. Yes, it is unequivocally the best Balearic island for kids aged 5 to 15. It is incredibly safe, the water is shallow, and the all-inclusive options remove all the culinary stress. But you absolutely must book 12 months ahead to secure those family packages for the peak summer.
Luxury.
Yes. But again, know what you are buying. If you are seeking understated rural excellence, like reading a book by the pool at Toral Bank or eating the Fornell's lobster in total peace, it is perfect.
Yeah.
But it will deeply disappoint you if you are looking for Ibiza-style bottle service and loud DJs.
Finally, the digital nomad or solo traveler.
Yes, but only in May, June, or September. There is excellent Wi-Fi in the cafes of Mahon, but the July and August accommodation prices will instantly break the remote work model. You cannot sustainably pay 150 euros a night for a basic room while working from your laptop. Ultimately, Menorca is a mirror. It rewards deliberate, culturally curious travelers who plan ahead, and it aggressively penalizes unprepared, budget-seeking partygoers.
I think that sums it up perfectly. Menorca isn't a destination you can just wing when you show up at the airport. It requires precision. Treat it like a delicate instrument, not a blunt tool.
And if we connect this all back to that looming legislation we discussed at the top of the hour, it leaves me with a very provocative question about the future. If the Balearic Parliament successfully caps tourism at 17.8 million people, those 73,000 extra airline seats are going to become fiercely contested. Will Menorca's absolute commitment to understatement and low supply ironically make it the most exclusive, hyper-expensive island in Europe by 2030, completely erasing the mid-range traveler entirely?
That is the honest verdict from Phil and H. If this guide helped you decide, follow Phil and H Travel. We publish new honest destination guides every single week. We will see you on the next one.